Gucci Mane finally opening his mouth, and what he said and what he did not say, and the question of how the federal government built a 9-person kidnapping case around him without him saying a single word to law enforcement, has the entire internet locked in the most heated debate hip-hop has had in years. Did Gucci snitch? Or did the feds not need him at all? And if they didn't need him, what does that mean for Pooh Shiesty? Here's how it got there. The paperwork naming 3 people. Gucci publicly saying he never talked to the government. Joe Budden having one of his worst nightmares in real time. And the ankle monitor data that may have made Gucci's cooperation completely unnecessary in the first place. This story does not have one answer. It has layers, and we are peeling every single one of them back today. Let's get into it. For weeks after the arrest dropped, Gucci Mane said nothing. No Instagram post, no statement through his label, no interview. While the internet spent every waking hour debating whether he had cooperated with federal investigators, whether he had identified his alleged attackers to the FBI, whether the man who once told the world his only request in any dispute was that no police be involved had just handed 9 people to the Department of Justice. Gucci Mane was silent. And in hip-hop, silence reads as confirmation until something interrupts it. Then the clip surfaced. Short, unscripted, pointed directly at anyone questioning him. That is Gucci Mane's response to the people calling him a snitch. Not a press release, not a carefully worded denial through a publicist. Just Gucci, apparently unbothered, daring anyone with an opinion about what he did or did not tell the government to come say it to his face. And while that clip does not answer the core legal question, does not tell us what information he provided, to whom, and when, it does something else. It establishes tone. It tells the world that whatever happened in that Dallas studio on January 10th of 2026, Gucci Mane does not feel like a man who owes anyone an apology. But the clip that had been circulating before Gucci said anything, the clip the internet had been using as Exhibit A in the case against him, tells a very different story about what he once said his standards were. That video, from around 2021, Gucci on camera, publicly staking his position on how he handles disputes, is the foundation of everything the snitching debate is built on. Because according to the criminal complaint filed in the Northern District of Texas, the victim identified in the case as RD provided information that helped investigators identify and name the suspects. The complaint lists 3 names as having been identified, and the moment that language appeared in public court documents, hip-hop pulled out this old clip and put them side by side. This is what he said. This is what the paperwork says he did. Contradiction confirmed. Except it is not that simple, because the question of what helped identify actually means in federal complaint language. Whether it constitutes full cooperation, a witness interview, a formal statement, or something far more limited, is a legal distinction that the internet collapsed into a single word: snitch. And Gucci Mane has now publicly stated that he is not cooperating with the government. And an FBI agent testifying in open court during the bond proceedings for Big 30 confirmed that he had not heard from Gucci Mane, the government's own agent, in open court, saying the alleged victim in the case at the center of this entire prosecution had not been in contact with them. So, which is it? The complaint language says he helped identify. The FBI agent says he hasn't been in contact. Gucci says he's not cooperating. All 3 of those things are simultaneously in the public record. And the only way to hold all 3 of them in your head at once is to understand that federal complaints are built from a wide range of sources: surveillance footage, electronic monitoring data, cell phone records, fingerprints, social media posts, rental car records. And that helped identify in a complaint affidavit can mean something as limited as a victim being shown a photo array at the scene and nodding. It does not automatically mean Gucci Mane sat across from FBI agents and gave a recorded statement naming every person in that room. And then there is the image that started circulating the same week of Gucci apparently in good spirits, out with his wife, acting every bit like a man who considers this chapter closed, a $1 million nigga. That is how Gucci frames what was allegedly taken from him. Not the wedding ring, not the watch, not the contract signed at gunpoint, but the audacity of it, the nerve of coming at him for something like money. That short clip, layered against the image of 9 defendants facing federal kidnapping charges, tells you everything about where Gucci Mane's head is in this situation. Not rattled, not traumatized, not the posture of a man who has been leaning on law enforcement for protection, the posture of a man who believes the system handled it and that he never had to lift a finger for it to happen. The Joe Budden podcast was one of the first platforms to break down this distinction with any real clarity. And Budden's fundamental argument, the one the snitching camp has the most trouble answering, is structural. Gucci Mane and Pooh Shiesty were not street partners. They were not co-conspirators in crime. They were a label executive and a signed artist, a business relationship. When that relationship allegedly transformed, without warning or consent, into a violent armed hostage situation, Gucci Mane was not a participant in criminal activity. He was the target of it. And in that context, the street code, the code that says you handle your business in the street, not with the law, was not a code Gucci Mane had agreed to operate under with the men who allegedly walked into that studio with guns. FBI and TBI agents hit the family home in Cordova, Tennessee, before 5:30 in the morning with flashbangs and arrest warrants. Boxes came out, neighbors were woken up, and the arrest operation, which took down 8 of 9 defendants simultaneously in Dallas, Memphis, and Nashville in a single morning, was the product of a multi-jurisdictional FBI investigation that had been running since January 10th. An investigation that, according to everything now in the public record, built its case on electronic monitoring data, cell phone records, rental car documentation, surveillance footage, fingerprints, social media posts, and a Staples receipt, not on a call from Gucci Mane, which raises the question that changes the entire framing of this debate. What if Gucci Mane's cooperation, or lack of it, was never the critical variable in this case at all? What if the federal government had everything they needed the moment Pooh Shiesty walked into that studio, wearing an ankle monitor that was transmitting his location in real time to the court system that had ordered him to stay home? The ankle monitor data placed him at the studio. It placed him at the Staples. It placed him in the vehicles. The U.S. attorney at the press conference announcing the arrests listed the electronic monitoring data first among the evidence, not victim testimony, not a cooperating witness, not Gucci Mane's account. The device Pooh Shiesty was court-ordered to wear as a condition of his supervised release from his prior 2021 federal firearms conviction was, apparently, the most cooperative element in this entire investigation, and it never said a word. Let's lay out exactly what federal investigators say they had before anyone picked up a phone to call Gucci Mane. Because once you see the full inventory of evidence that prosecutors assembled and presented at the DOJ press conference, and then layered against the subsequent revelations from the bond hearings, the question of whether Gucci cooperated starts to look like almost a side conversation to the main event. Electronic monitoring data, cell phone records, license plate readers, rental car records. And that is before we get to the surveillance footage, the fingerprints, the social media posts, and the Greyhound bus records. The U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Texas stood at that podium and described a case built from digital infrastructure, the kind of evidence that exists in databases and server logs and court-ordered monitoring systems, entirely independent of what any victim chooses to say or not say to law enforcement. William Sr. stopped at a Staples in Frisco, Texas, and printed out the contract termination paperwork, confirmed by receipt and surveillance footage, before driving to the studio. That piece of paper, the document prosecutors say proves the entire operation was premeditated, was recovered from the scene. It has the date Williams Jr. allegedly forced Gucci Mane to write on it. It exists independently of anything Gucci Mane said or did not say. And then there were the fingerprints, lifted off red Solo cups at the crime scene, matching at least 2 defendants who had accepted drinks before the alleged takeover began. The defendants touched the cups. The cups went into evidence. The prints came back with names. And then, the detail that sealed it before anyone could even think about keeping a low profile. They posted the jewelry on their own accounts within hours of leaving the studio, while Pooh Shiesty's ankle monitor was still logging every ping of his location data. If Gucci Mane had called the FBI and said, "I'm not giving you anything," the federal government would have still had ankle monitor data, cell phone placement, rental car records, a Staples receipt, fingerprints on Solo cups, social media posts of the stolen jewelry, and Greyhound bus records of the RET to Memphis the following day. The case, as the U.S. Attorney described it at the press conference, was built on subpoenas and search warrants, not on the voluntary cooperation of the alleged victim. Which is why Big 30's attorney, Arthur Horn, moved the way he did at the bond hearing. Because he saw exactly what the evidence inventory looked like and understood that the cooperation question, the thing the internet was screaming about, was not the load-bearing wall of the prosecution's case. Horn's argument positions Big 30 as a man who had no personal stake in whether Pooh Shiesty got out of his 1017 Records contract. No motive, no role in the alleged planning. And then the bomb that Horn and every other defense attorney in this case immediately latched onto. There were no working video cameras inside the recording studio at the time of the alleged incident. No interior surveillance footage. None. The exterior cameras captured everything outside. Arrivals, departures, the group moving through the lobby. But the recording room, the control room, the space where prosecutors allege an AK-style pistol came out, and a man was choked to near unconsciousness, and a contract was signed at gunpoint. None of it was on camera. So here is where the case actually sits. No interior footage of the alleged crime. No confirmed cooperation from the primary victim. An FBI agent on the record in open court saying he has not heard from Gucci Mane, and the Fed's own testimony indicating that Pooh Shiesty and Big 30 were not directly tied to the firearms that allegedly appeared in the control room. The digital evidence, the ankle monitor, the cell phones, the Staples receipt, the social media posts, the Greyhound records, remains potent and largely uncontested. But the narrative evidence, the human testimony that would allow a jury to understand what actually happened inside that room, is currently missing its most important source. And that is not a minor gap. In a kidnapping trial, the victim's account is the center of gravity around which everything else orbits. Without it, the prosecution is asking a jury to convict on inference and circumstance, a significantly harder task than conviction on testimony. Charleston White saw all of this and came to his conclusion quickly. The feds built the case they could build. Brian Steele is going to contest every inference they try to draw. And the man the government says was the ringleader walked into this fight with the best defense attorney money can buy, and a victim who, publicly at least, is not cooperating. That is a different case than the one the DOJ announced at that press conference. Charleston White, accurately describing the federal government's methodology. They rewind every tape they can find. The Staples camera, the building lobby, the exterior of the studio, the hotel where several defendants stayed, the Greyhound station. Every public-facing camera in a 3-city radius became evidence. What they could not rewind was a camera that was never on. And that absence, the missing interior footage of the alleged crime itself, is the single biggest structural gap in the prosecution's evidence, the one that Big 30's team has already identified, and that Pooh Shiesty's defense team, led by Brian Steele, will build its entire trial strategy around. So the answer to the question, did the feds need Gucci, is almost certainly no, they did not. They had enough. The ankle monitor alone may have been sufficient to establish Pooh Shiesty's presence and his violation of home confinement terms, which, as the U.S. Attorney confirmed, is an aggravating factor that makes his sentencing exposure worse, regardless of what any witness says. But Gucci's silence is still significant, because in a federal trial, the victim's testimony, the first-hand account of what happened inside that recording room, is the difference between a case built on circumstantial digital evidence and a case built on a human being pointing across a courtroom and describing what they experienced. And right now, Gucci Mane has publicly declined to be that voice, which means the prosecution is going to trial, if it goes to trial, without the most powerful storytelling tool in any kidnapping case, the victim's own words. Once you accept that Gucci's silence is broken and that his public posture is defiance rather than cooperation, the question the internet has been asking, did he snitch, gives way to a different question entirely. One that is less dramatic, but far more consequential for everyone involved. What happens to the business now? Because at the center of this entire alleged operation, the reason 9 men allegedly drove from Memphis to Dallas, the reason a Staples receipt exists as federal evidence, the reason a contract was allegedly held under a gun and signed, was a recording deal, Pooh Shiesty's deal with 1017 Records, his desire to be released from it. His alleged decision when Gucci Mane said, no, to pursue that release through means the Department of Justice would later describe as kidnapping and armed robbery. And now, with both men on opposite sides of a federal criminal complaint, one in custody, one on camera, threatening anyone who questions him. The question of what that recording contract actually looks like right now is one that nobody in the industry has cleanly answered. Gucci's framing here is telling. He is not talking about the alleged violence. He is not talking about the gun, the forced signing, the wedding ring. He is talking about money, about the audacity of coming at someone of his financial stature, $1 million nigga, over something as comparatively small as a contract dispute. Which means that in Gucci Mane's head, the thing that allegedly motivated this entire federal conspiracy was not even worth the trouble it caused. A contract he could have renegotiated, a conversation he could have had through a lawyer on both sides, a situation that never needed to reach the point where FBI agents were setting flashbangs off in a Memphis neighborhood at 5:30 in the morning. And that framing matters for what comes next. Because the contract that prosecutors say Pooh Shiesty allegedly forced Gucci Mane to sign at gunpoint, the release he allegedly wanted so badly that he allegedly drove 9 people from Memphis to Dallas to get it, has no legal standing. A document signed under duress at gunpoint with the signing recorded on a co-defendant's cell phone as evidence of the coercion is not a valid contract release. It is a piece of paper that the prosecution is treating as proof of motive and premeditation. Whatever Pooh Shiesty thought he was walking out of that studio with, his relationship with 1017 Records is not resolved. It is not settled. If anything, it is now entangled inside a federal criminal case in a way that no entertainment lawyer in the world knows how to cleanly unwind. And Big 30's own attorney made clear at the bond hearing that the contract dispute was never his client's problem to begin with. They were going to make music together regardless. That line, stated plainly by Arthur Horn as a legal defense argument, accidentally captures the full tragedy of what allegedly happened in Dallas. Big 30 was allegedly there for a situation that had nothing to do with his own interests. The 9 people in that studio allegedly converged on a dispute between 2 men, one who wanted out of a deal and one who had not yet agreed to let him go. And the resolution Pooh allegedly pursued made the contract situation immeasurably worse for everyone while resolving nothing. Big 30's attorney, Arthur Horn, made this point from a different angle at the bond hearing. His argument that Big 30 has no personal interest in whether Pooh Shiesty has a contract with 1017 or not, that they were going to make music together regardless, is not just a legal defense posture. It is a statement about how the people closest to this situation viewed the underlying dispute. The contract was Pooh Shiesty's problem, not Big 30's, not the 6 other co-defendants, not the group that allegedly traveled from Memphis. The contract was between 2 men, Pooh and Gucci, and what allegedly happened in that studio was built around one man's need to resolve something that the other man apparently did not consider urgent enough to lose his jewelry over. And now Gucci is out here publicly saying he's not cooperating, and the FBI agent backed that up in court, and the signed contract document is sitting in federal evidence as proof of the crime rather than proof of its resolution. The thing Pooh allegedly bled for, the release, the freedom from 1017, the ability to take his music wherever he wanted, is worth less than the paper it was printed on. It was printed at a Staples. And it is now a federal exhibit. Charleston White's read on the firearms issue cuts directly to the contract question too. Because if the government's own testimony is that Pooh Shiesty and Big 30 were not directly tied to the weapons if the physical evidence of who held what gun in that room is genuinely contested. Then what the prosecution is left arguing is conspiracy. That Pooh Shiesty orchestrated and led a plan. That the plan involved firearms, even if his fingerprints were not on them. That the motive for the plan was a recording contract. And that he allegedly traveled 9 people across state lines to execute it. Federal conspiracy charges do not require you to pull a trigger. They require you to have set the wheels in motion. And the Staples receipt, the rental car, the phone calls to the studio, all of that puts Williams Sr. and Williams Jr. at the center of the wheel. What Gucci's public non-cooperation does to that conspiracy charge is not make it disappear. It makes the government prove it without him. And proving a kidnapping conspiracy without the primary alleged victim's testimony, when there are no working RIOR cameras, when the firearms evidence is murky, when the defense has Brian Steele, is a fundamentally different trial than the one the DOJ announced at that press conference. And Gucci keeps walking around like none of this touches him. Because for Gucci Mane, it may genuinely not. He still has his label. He still has his catalog. He still has his marriage and his life outside of this case. The jewelry that was allegedly taken from him, the watch, the wedding ring, the earrings, the cash. Some of it potentially recoverable through the federal forfeiture process, now that defendants are in custody. His business continues. His brand continues. And the artist who allegedly put a gun to his head to get out of his contract is now in federal custody, represented by the most expensive defense attorney money can buy, looking at a potential life sentence, still signed to 1017 Records. The irony of that last detail is almost too much to hold. He allegedly did all of this to get free, and he is less free now than he has ever been. As of early April 2026, Pooh Shiesty remains in federal custody. The 1017 contract is unresolved. Big 30 is on house arrest and appealing. Lontrell Williams Sr. has been ordered to Dallas. Gucci has spoken. The government has its digital case. And the trial, when it comes, will be fought on the terrain of what can be proven in that room, without a victim who wants to talk, without cameras that were rolling, and without firearms, evidence that cleanly ties the names on the indictment to the weapons the complaint describes. Gucci Mane finally broke his silence. He looked at the camera and dared anyone to bring it to him personally. And the only response that matters now is the one that will come from a federal courtroom in the Northern District of Texas, months or years from now, where 12 jurors will decide what actually happened in that Dallas studio on January 10th, 2026. And whether the man who allegedly wanted his freedom badly enough to allegedly take 9 people across state lines to get it will ever be free again.